This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. Welcome to the Triple Option. Here's your host, Paul Catalina.
Alongside Royden Ogletree. Royden, we missed you last week because your job's gotten a tad more difficult in the last couple of weeks because your sports director, Darby Brown, has moved on to Austin.
Bigger and better things, some would say.
Yeah. Depending on your perspective of Austin, Texas.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's the thing of whether you want to live in Austin or not. And her boyfriend does live there, so I mean, outside of a job and a bigger market and all that, it would seem that you would want to be with the person you're in love with. But
who's to say, you know?
Yeah, I mean.
I decided to do it, but.
It doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
So did I.
Yeah.
So did Garrett. Garrett did
pretty much out of high school.
19 out of high school.
I've been married for almost 20 years. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Separate houses, though, right?
No.
Oh, okay. I'll say some people, separate beds. Some people. Have you heard those stories of people that are like, yeah, me and my wife just have like different apartments or whatever.
Different rooms in their house. Yeah, because they can't sleep. Well, I mean, part of it is just.
And they're like we're happily married. They're not stepping out on each other or whatever.
They're just their sleep bothers me, and I've decided that we'll just be in different rooms, and that's fine.
Apropos of Austin, have you seen the hotel prices for like everything that's going on down there?
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like F1 race. UT game versus Georgia. I think Eminem's in town, and then another artist, maybe Sting or something, is playing. It's like all the hotels that are about $150 on a regular weekend or like on a concert weekend are $800 to $900 a night.
Yeah, that is. If I'm paying $800 a night, there's the concierge service.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's
not like at the Ramada Inn. No.
Like if I'm paying $800 a night, I should be able to call down and be like, yes.
Foot rub, please.
I am fresh out of brie. And I was promised that there would always be brie in here. And I've come back from my mid-afternoon brie in the lounge, and there's no brie here. And then, sir, how much brie can you eat? How much brie can you bring?
Exactly.
Also, we're low on everything.
Yeah.
All of the things that come with this room. We would like more of.
I'm stealing your towels.
Yes. I'm not paying extra for this robe. It's coming with me. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. That $800, $900 a night, I'll tell you, that's a hotel I love because that's a hotel that has a bidet. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Except this time it's literally the Holiday Inn.
Yeah. Okay. No powdered eggs. Like I should not, for $800 a night, I should not walk down to the breakfast buffet and see powdered eggs.
A muffin, a prepackaged muffin.
No.
Yeah.
No. For $800 a night, I walk to Henri, the French omelet chef.
Yeah.
And say, Henri, give me your specialty. And then he puts some weird ingredient in there like Kobe beef.
Yeah.
Or it's like, here you go, sir.
Oh, this is Moudang? This is it.
Yeah, here's Moudang.
How did you That's so bad.
No. Yeah, exactly. So, Royden, this was a ridiculous weekend in college football. And before we get to our main topics of the day, which are the SEC and Big Ten making a further step into world domination, and how the Big 12 and ACC respond to that, I would like to know your thoughts on what I think was the most fun college football weekend, top to bottom, I've ever sat and watched on TV.
Yeah, well, that was the bit going into this weekend that it was supposed to. Oh, who would ever have their wedding on this weekend? You idiots! Yeah. And then going into it, there was teams had lost, and so the matchups on paper didn't look as promising as they once did when the season started. But then Oregon and Ohio State happened. And the LSU game came down to the final went into overtime. And I mean, the Red River rivalry was a blowout, but the rest of it just was down to the wire. You had comebacks by Penn State and all, everything that came with that. And Utah lost on like a Friday, like the precursors for it were good too. I thought it was, granted, I'm not going to lie to you and say that I got to watch every game because again, being married comes with things like cleaning the house on the weekend and mowing the lawn and doing all that stuff.
Here's what I had to do. We had to do a few errands first. And she said she was great about it, but she was like, pick the window where you most likely
that's a good strategy.
To miss some things. The other thing I had to do is I had to do comedy on Saturday night.
Ooh.
And we were up against there was not a lot of people there. We were up against two different country concerts, Clint Black and Travis Tritt, Celebrations in town,
right? All
that. So the people who came really
wanted to see you,
or just were like, "Hey, we're at the hotel. What are we doing? This is $17. Let's go."
Yeah,
So that was kind of the thing. So
did you have a TV up with your set where you're just we're gonna click through ESPN?
It was at a brewery, and so it's improv. So quite often during improv, you'll be like, "Okay, well, we're gonna send Royden out of the room."
Yeah,
and when he comes back, he's going to have to play up this part because he's a janitor and he doesn't know that.
Yeah.
So, all that. So I went out there 2 times for that, and I watched the games on the TVs that were out there at Bear Arms Brewery. And so that was fine. That was great. Happy with that. I worked out well. The show was an hour and a half. It worked out. By the time I got home, I was in time to see the second half of everything. Mm-hmm. So it was great. Home at 8:45.
Yeah,
done. So,
I mean, you got a nightcapper. Even I started watching it. You got a nightcapper with Ashton Jancy at Hawaii, even too. I thought it was a really fun, great weekend. I think the best thing, obviously, was probably the Ohio State Oregon game. I really enjoyed the end of that LSU game. Nussmeier throwing that guy open to tie the game was probably the best throw that he's ever made. And seeing that against Ole Miss was spectacular. Side note, does LSU play defense anymore?
It's a work in progress.
Okay.
It's a slight work in progress.
Defensive back university, right?
Once upon a time.
Okay.
Once upon a time.
Actually now they're wide receiver you.
Yeah. Okay.
Definitely wide receiver you.
They're right. You could make the argument that it's Ohio State or LSU. If it was the depth chart now that coaches do in college, which they don't do in the NFL because, we're professionals here. It's not Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. They tell you it's Justin Fields.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Mm-hmm. We're adults here.
Yeah.
College is like left guard, Royden Ogletree or Jack McKenzie or Emery Winter. Who's the left guard?
Yeah. One of them might actually still be hurt.
Hey, when you start the game and the left guard goes out there, which guy's that going to be?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm not. I'm going to tell you all 3 of them. The other coach is going to be.
See.
The other coach is going to be like, oh, wow, 3 different left guards. Ooh.
Have to really prepare for that one.
There are so many things that college coaches do that I just just that. But yeah, it's Ohio State or LSU. And before one side or the other comes in, we could play the game all day.
Splitting hairs.
Of the best receivers in the NFL right now, I think Alabama comes into that 3rd spot or where it's 1-1 and then you're technically 3rd, right?
Yeah.
But when you've got Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jackson Smith and Jigba versus Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Brian Thomas Jr., all those other ones, you're kind of.
I say being buoyed by Justin Jefferson, the best receiver, and then Jamar Chase, 1B. This isn't a conversation, but that we were wanting to have. But I will say that I think they have the slight edge in that. The rest of the Ohio State receivers have to. They're yes, they're the most talented people in the world, and Chris Olave hasn't had maybe the quarterback play that he deserves. Chris Olave came to the Texans, but the idea that half the receivers or half the best receivers in fantasy football are all from 2 universities is bananas. Anyway.
Yeah, no, it is. So, all that being said, it was a great weekend. It was amazing. And I actually think that, if you go back to the weekend before, now it didn't live up to the billing of, all these ranked versus ranked games, but we're getting every week is getting wild because we actually do have some form of parity in college football for the first time in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
Where it's legitimate. It's not so weird. It's crazy to see and your brain still flips it that way. But Vanderbilt beating Alabama is crazy, and they hadn't done it in 40 years.
Yeah.
But there's going to be a lot more of those, and there have been a lot more of those in recent years, the same type of games where it just doesn't make sense, and it happens because, again, they're like guys are getting paid now. So, if you can get paid slightly more to go be a tight end at Vandy where you're going to play more, then all of a sudden Alabama doesn't have 3 tight ends that are studs anymore. Mm-hmm. It's that one other guy that goes there. Or, Eli Stowers is Vandy's tight end. He's really good. Well, he tried to be a quarterback at 2 other places, and then finally it occurred to him, it's like a coach finally said, this is not going to be your future. Do what Felipe Franks and who else am I thinking of? Who's the Redskins tight end that was at Florida?
God. Oh, my God. Give me a second.
Logan Thomas was a quarterback at Virginia Tech. He also played for Washington. The Trey Burton at the Eagles.
Not Aaron Hernandez. Yeah. Different Florida tight end.
Yeah. So, but yeah, there's a lot of those that just decided, hey, I should be a tight end because that's where I can make more money than this. So, yeah, things have changed. So I think we're going to see more and more of those.
Well, and then Alabama nearly lost again this weekend or wanted to. Huh?
Jordan Reed.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Jordan Reed was the one I was thinking of.
Was he a quarterback?
He was a quarterback at Florida. And Jordan Reed is a big dude, too. Yeah, and he wound up being a good tight end. Got hurt a lot because part of the problem is when you transition from quarterback to tight end, tight ends have to,
block,
hit people and don't just kind of randomly get hit. So at quarterback, you had to just prepare your body to be hit as opposed to hitting. I think that's –
yeah, Felipe Franks made a special teams play, and people were like, what? What is happening?
Yeah. So, yeah, Florida's had a lot of those. But which explains maybe why they haven't won a national title since Urban Meyer left.
Yeah, they got tight ends playing quarterbacks.
They have Trey Burton, Felipe Franks, and Jordan Reed, all tight ends.
Jeff Driscoll. For Tebow.
Jeff Driscoll.
Yeah.
Tim Tebow. Yeah.
One of the best tight ends.
10 years after he should have made the transition, he did. So
Tebow, man. People in Denver still talk about that season with Tebow at the helm. But
I guarantee you ask anybody who tackled anybody on that team, the defense was like, no. We needed him to get us in field goal range twice a game.
Yeah.
Our defense was lethal.
Yeah, exactly.
As proven that we won a Super Bowl with half of Peyton Manning the next year.
2 years from then.
2 years, yeah. 2 years from then, with half of Peyton Manning, we won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So.
No, I don't. The parity thing is interesting because I'm trying to think back in the history of college football in the 80s, and you had these teams that wouldn't have been maybe historically successful. Like SMU had some success, obviously, when, SMU and TCU had historic success in the 40s and the 50s, and then it went away, and then there's all kinds of stories about paying players, and the great equalizer were the bags of money that would show up on the, on Eric Dickerson's doorstep or whatever. And maybe that provided some parity back then, but then again, there's a lot of have and have-nots. Like Texas would recruit players just to keep them away from A&M or Baylor, and would just sit them on the bench just so the other teams couldn't have them. And so, the scholarship number was a great equalizer. The under-the-table paying of players was a little bit of an equalizer. That went away, and so then again you see larger programs having more and more success. But then, the introductions of spread offenses became a great equalizer in college football. Maybe not to the amount of getting the most talent, but having to figure out how to defend those offenses became sort of an equalizer then. And then it kind of went away, and then you had all these just strictly SEC championships. And, of course, Saban became the great sort of I don't even know what the word would, but he shifted things to where it was it's just Alabama. Sometimes LSU gets in there. So, occasionally Georgia would come up, or a Saban acolyte would supplant him somehow or another. But
just one Saban acolyte
just
really
one,
has done that.
But it is since Saban has retired, it seems like become and the and in the introduction of NIL, you see these swoons and these highs of different teams coming in. But yeah, I think you're correct in saying that even within these massive conferences where they thought, I'm not sure the Big Ten was like really planning on their bell cow like Ohio State and Michigan losing in the ways that they've had. But of course, the introduction of more talent into those conferences with the Pac-12 teams that they brought in has made it to where top to bottom, these conferences that were dominated by these premier programs now have to have a little bit more competition. I mean, and in the Big 12, the poster child of parity, it's even more so that, Utah thought they'd come in and run it, and I did too. Now it's like every other weekend the underdog is winning. Yeah. So there's a number of things that go into why that is. I think deeper conferences play a role in that. I think NIL plays a role in that. But it is fun to watch when you don't have specifically one team or two teams that we're all kind of like, well, it's just going to be those two teams at the end of the year, right?
Yeah. No,
running the show. Like, Texas has been unbelievable. I still think that they can get, in Georgia less so, but I still think that they can get got by Georgia this weekend.
Yeah.
And so there's not a doubt in my mind that could happen. Now, Texas could go in there and roll them because Georgia
I don't think any team in the country is playing with as much confidence and swagger as Texas is right now.
No, I don't think so either. And it's, fans in the chat may not like it, but they look like the best team in the country.
It's generally bad for planet Earth that's happening, but
yeah, it's just the meme of like society if Texas wasn't running the country, and it's just like futuristic society.
Did you ever see the show Fringe?
No.
Like, so the idea of Fringe was that there were there was two Earths.
Yeah.
Or multiple, but the two, and there's this mad scientist that kind of opened up a door between the two of them.
Yeah, yeah.
But they also there were these people from the future who were controlling time. Mm-hmm. Bald and everything, and the thing that it was so polluted and all these things. It was because this one thing had happened.
Yeah.
Or these things that transpired. So I think about that a lot when I say these things. Look, if Texas keeps winning, eventually, that they would show these guys and they would be eating. They'd be eating together, and they'd be putting pepper and hot sauce on their food because they couldn't taste anything because of the pollution and all that. And I think about that's what we're gonna be doing. This is why
eventually it's all Soylent Green.
Yeah, it's all Soylent Green. Yeah, Soylent Green is gonna happen. Yeah. I know that's probably not true, but at least in my mind that it is.
In your head canon, that's,
exactly.
That tracks. It's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think in the SEC, I think it's a good thing in the SEC though, for sure, because you've had Alabama dominate for so many years. Not to say to see them get knocked down a peg, and look, again, trading one evil for the other evil, Alabama for Texas. Like you said, the best thing for this, I don't know, maybe for the casual college football fan, you want to see the winners knocked down a peg. And so that has become Alabama over the past, 15 years. So maybe for the casual college football fan, they're like, hell yeah, Texas winning is awesome. But I would argue that the lower teams like Vanderbilt, like Kentucky, who is now, had a couple of upsets and was close to an upset of Georgia, and some of these teams that might not otherwise have been in the conversation, having them rise to at least the middle tier of the SEC mm-hmm. has been really fun.
Yeah.
Because it would be the SEC is the deepest conference, and the argument would be made, and look at all the championships that the SEC has won. And I get the argument. But the idea that, we have this conference pride and it's all this, and it was just Alabama, really, and then Georgia here recently. LSU would sometimes sneak in there, and of course Florida had the early championships. But the idea that over the past 10 years you were rooting for the strength of this conference, and really it was just Alabama, and now you actually have a really deep conference. And in the Big Ten, it was really just Ohio State, and now Michigan has gotten a little, won the championship and gotten progressively better, but now it's Oregon and all of these teams. I think it's really good for the sport. Now, fans of those universities may argue differently, but I think a rising tide lifts all boats when it comes to this stuff.
Absolutely. When we come back, Ari Temkin was on our show yesterday, Big 12 Radio on TuneIn, and made some compelling points that the Big 12 is very underrated. And I will shoot those out to you, and I want your opinion on it. And then I want to talk about this Big 10 SEC partnership, axis of evil kind of a thing. I know some people like, who do we have on that's like, I don't want to make that comparison. And I was like, oh, I mean, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I can't remember who it was.
I'm not worried about them, I'm not worried about getting canceled for that.
The suit that comes with that.
Yeah, and I'm not worried about somebody going, hey, well, it was a different – no. Listen, I'll do comic book references all you want.
Yeah, sure.
If that makes it easier for you. This is Hydra. This is Hydra and Magneto making a deal, which probably would never happen, but even still. Or this is Magneto and Dr. Doom going like, high five, let's do this. We'll do that. Lex Luthor and the Joker going, hey, I've got some plans. Like,
exactly.
That's what it is. That you may think it's not, but it is. And so what did the Big 12 and ACC do to counter that? Now, granted, if they did the same thing, there would not be as much like hype, but it still would be a good idea.
Yeah.
Fight fire with fire if you can in that regard. We'll talk about that next. This is 365 Sports.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. Welcome to the Triple Option. Here's your host, Paul Catalina.
Alongside Royden Ogletree of KWTX, Channel 10 here. And Royden, do we have an announcement yet on what your future is? Can we make it? Or
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
Not yet. We'll be waiting on that. I was on the Friday Night Football show this past Friday for the first time in, like 5 years or something like that. I think I had exited that show a while back, and it was weird getting on and reading highlights for the first time in forever. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, it was kind of like riding a bike. It was fun. It was good to be back.
If I give you a highlight exclamation every week, can you work it in?
Sure.
And I promise not to make it boom goes the dynamite.
No, if you tweet me like
it will be compelling.
I genuinely think if you tweet me
say
whammy or something like that.
And then I would like you to clip it and we'll play it when you come on this show.
Yeah.
Can you do that for me?
I think I could do that.
You think you do that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would also like the chat room if you have an idea of a highlight exclamation. My favorite hockey one was always Keith Olbermann.
Yeah.
I know you probably don't remember the SportsCenter days of Keith Olbermann.
No, but I know Keith Olbermann kind of going off the rails a little bit.
Keith Olbermann, like, functionally was the best SportsCenter. Keith and Dan was the best SportsCenter
No,
ever.
yeah, I'd always heard.
It was the best ever. Keith's political leanings and kind of craziness in that notwithstanding.
Right.
And his, like, if you read the book about ESPN, like, everybody's like, well, Olbermann's a dick. Like, he's just awful to everybody. But
those guys have all the fun?
Yeah, those guys have all the fun. But he was the best. Garrett, do you remember Olbermann and Patrick together?
A little bit.
Yeah. But Olbermann and Patrick together were great. But he had a great one for hockey. Was he puts the biscuit in the basket, and I loved it. I still think of it all that. Like I've said it a couple times watching hockey with Amanda, and she's like, "What?" I'm like, "That's the it's a cool thing." Yeah, but puts the biscuit in the basket was something. So it'd be something in that regard.
Mine was Scott Van Pelt would just take what was it? He would say from Aqua Teen Hunger Force, he would say, "#1 in the hood, G." And that was like I always enjoyed that as a teenager.
The Craig Kilborn, when he was on SportsCenter, and most people know him more from his late night comedy work, but when he was on SportsCenter, his home run call was "It's baseball's special moment." And I liked that one a lot. Kenny Mayne had a billion. It wasn't really just one Kenny Mayne catchphrase. It was just the way he would say.
It's all deadpan, dry. Yeah.
For golf, it was always into the clown's mouth, for that. But he had one, and we had him on the show right after he left ESPN. And we need to get him back. I love Kenny Mayne so much. He's so hilarious.
What's he even doing? He's hanging out?
No, I think he's working for one of the, FanDuel TV or something like that.
I loved him.
But and so he does a lot of great things for veterans, for people with disabilities, for people with learning disabilities. So he's poured himself a lot in that charity because he has family that suffered, But so Kenny Mayne had one time, and he didn't even remember this, but I found it, and I actually emailed it to him. So he didn't remember it, but Andre Agassi and Michael Chang grew up playing tennis together, and there was a tennis match where they were, and it was very early on in Kenny's career, but there was a tennis match they were playing against each other, and Andre Agassi won, and then he ran and jumped over the net to go shake his hand. But how Kenny Mayne described it is Agassi wins in straight sets and then hops the net to pummel Chang and steal his racket. And I was like, I was just gasping for air hearing that. It was so ridiculous. Racket. Yeah. But yeah, he was the absolute best. Do you believe in miracles? Okay, what else do you have the good?
Well, I mean,
there is your dagger. Okay, that's a good one. Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, I mean, the best call of all time is Al Michaels' "Do you believe in miracles?"
Yeah.
Yes, and that's probably the #1 call of all time. But just like SportsCenter highlight reads, I love that. And then I think it might be Butchergrass every time that a home run it is bartender, give me some Jack. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Butchergrass is almost as funny as Kenny Mayne.
Yeah.
He's right there. He's right there. Mm-hmm. He also does, if you send him a picture of your chicken parm, he'll review it online, which I think is a really funny
thing. It's a great bit.
Yeah.
The super, super specific.
Yeah. You're don't mess with my parm, all that.
Yeah.
He's big into chicken parm. Anyway, so is the Big 12
Why
underrated?
Is Gamora? What?
Why? Yeah. Is the Big 12 underrated?
It's tough because when everyone beats up on each other, it's how do we get a clear understanding of where this ranks? And you'd have to look at some of the non-conference schedules, and everybody's caping for BYU, and for good reason now, and their strengths of schedules. And I think it's from an entertainment value standpoint, if you're strictly looking at it from there, it is by far, and people would argue, well, look at what the Big Ten did this weekend, but by far the most entertaining conference. It's nonsensical.
Yeah.
It's silly. And I think if you want college football in its purest form, which is nonsense sport, just a nonsense sport where things turn upside down are supposed to turn upside down every weekend, and you don't have these, the Chiefs are just going to win, name it, the Patriots are going to take it again this year or whatever. And you get that at the top, again, with Alabama over the past 15 years. If you want a purely entertainment league, which is kind of what the Big 12 has branded themselves on, then from that perspective, it is underrated. From the perspective of, do they have teams that are going to make noise come the postseason? Well, that's yet to be seen. I think that for the longest time, they just had this branding problem. And it comes with the territory of Oklahoma back in the day not being able to get it done, 10 years ago when the playoffs started, and not being able to capitalize on those. Oh, well, they won 12 games in the Big 12. Surely they'll, they were 12-0, and then losing immediately in the 14 playoff. And then TCU getting absolutely trounced a few years ago, after they beat Michigan, but nobody wants to talk about that. But, absolutely getting trounced a few. So there was like a branding problem, I think. And then all those years of Texas being down, the big names weren't coming through when they should have. Baylor,
Baylor
for how fun, for how fun they were, and then Baylor and TCU went head to head, and then they just completely dismissed them both. But then Baylor losing their New Year's Six bowl games, and go on down the list of why I think they had a bad branding problem for a long time. But for years, I think it's been one of the more fun conferences to sit down on a Saturday and watch. Because from top to bottom, there is the most parity of any league ever.
Yeah. And
if you have no investment in it, I'm going to sit down and watch Kansas State take on Arizona or whoever, because Noah Fafita could throw for 400 yards and Avery Johnson could run around and score 1 billion touchdowns. Or we have these awesome defenses like Iowa State and BYU, and, and the conversations get diluted a little bit in that, nobody knows how to gauge who's who, but I don't know. I find it to be highly entertaining.
Okay, I'll put this to you. BYU is ranked 13th. They are behind Tennessee, Clemson, Miami, and Ohio State. Who has Ohio State beaten?
Well, no one now.
Yeah. Their best win is against Iowa, who is currently unranked.
Yeah, but they're an okay team.
Okay. Who is Miami's best win against?
Cal.
Or Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
Who both are currently unranked. Or Florida on the road, who's going to fire their coach. Okay. And look, I'm not saying that these teams aren't great, right? Miami's really good. Ohio State is the deepest team in the country. But he pointed out the inherent flaws in the rankings. Okay. Clemson has been rolling along since they got thumped by Georgia.
Yeah.
Right?
Where are we with Georgia? The transitive property thing, we've talked about it before, is always weird.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
But when you talk about your resume and who you've beaten, they've beaten Appalachian State. They've beaten NC State, who has one of the worst defenses that they've ever had in their history. They've beaten Stanford. They've beaten Florida State, who is by far the most disappointing team in the country. And they've beaten Wake Forest. This week they'll play They'll play Virginia. Then they'll play Louisville, who will be the best team they've played since that time. Then Virginia Tech, then Pitt, then the Citadel in South Carolina. So their schedule does get a little tougher, but
they can be staring down the barrel of 11-1.
But they don't play Miami.
Yeah.
They do play Pitt. And that's an undefeated team right now. But they do, have 3 weeks before they do. Or 3 games before they do. I don't know. I'm not saying they shouldn't be ranked high, but BYU is a team that's beaten SMU, who's ranked now. They've beaten Kansas State, who's ranked now. Those things where it's not built in because of who you are. Yeah. Tennessee. Okay, who's Tennessee's biggest win?
It was NC State at the time.
Again, OU, but OU was ranked then. They're not ranked now. And saying, well, they were 15th when they beat them, no.
Well,
here's the thing.
We do this every year.
Yeah. You're not who you outside of a massive wave of injuries.
Yeah.
A massive wave of injuries. You are who you are at the end of the year, not in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So the rankings at the end of the year, the final ones are the ones where this team's been They beat this team who's been pretty much, 10 to 15 all year long. They beat this team that's also in the top 12. They beat this team that's number 20 and has been kind of number 20 all year long. They beat ranked teams. They beat this team that's just outside the top 25, on the way up. That's a resume to me. And the Big 12 currently has more of that to me, and Ari convinced me of this, than most of the other teams do. Now, LSU is behind a lot of these teams now. They have better wins than that win against Ole Miss is a better win than almost any team in the SEC has, except Alabama over Georgia and Vandy over Bama.
Yeah.
So Georgia over Clemson's a great win. Okay, but then so all these stuff start to cancel each other out, which is why we can't do the transitive property. So I think the Big 12 and the ACC to some extent are kind of the same this year in that maybe they're a little bit underrated. Or not being fairly measured against the stack because of the SEC and a little bit of Big Ten bias.
Yeah, I think that again, it was a branding problem, but the idea of preseason rankings has become more and more outdated as we go along, and with the mid-season playoff poll rankings that come out anyway. And maybe you need it as a measuring tool to begin with. So we say, oh, well, they had, but I really think with strength of schedule and strength of record coming in and being a big play that I think these organizations have started to use, I think that's starting to cancel out these preseason rankings. And the idea that we can start with, no offense, what was Florida State? 9th? 10th?
9th,
yeah.
10th, yeah.
Yeah, so the idea that we can start with Florida State is 9th. We think they're the 9th best team before we have even set foot on the field.
Yeah.
It's asinine.
Yeah.
And that's not to pick on Florida State, but any team that starts at Clemson over the years, over the past few years, any team that starts at, we think they're the 5th best team, and then all of a sudden they're 5th or 3rd or 4th or 5th in their conference at the end of the year.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to start. And they'll never get rid of the AP poll ever. It just won't happen. The writers won't let that happen.
No.
But the idea that we can start with, they had this top 10 win.
I would take those polls, though, out of the metric.
Yeah.
I would take them out or not include them until the last part of the rankings.
Yeah, I think that the idea that we can start with everyone's essentially starting from zero, but not really, because Michigan, who has been extremely beatable this year, starts at what did they start at?
12th.
Yeah, exactly. So it's but then Texas goes in there and trounces them.
To my point on Texas. Look, I think Texas is the best team right now.
Yes, eye test goes into this as well.
The eye test goes into that as well. But they have yet to be tested really either.
Yeah.
And that starts this week. So we'll see. When they start playing playoff teams, when Georgia's a playoff caliber team, how are they going to do?
Yeah.
Right? So that's their first real test. And saying that Michigan and Oklahoma were tested them, no.
Yeah, I think the counter argument is that for the Big 12 is that all these teams – who we know are good, are then beating up on each other. So how good is each team individually? And I think if BYU or Iowa State comes out of these games sort of unscathed, do they play each other? I don't have the schedules. Do Iowa State and BYU?
They don't. They can only be in the championship.
Yeah, so if they come out of these games unscathed, maybe we get a real look at what the Big 12 actually has to offer at the top, instead of the middle cannibalizing each other. So that's maybe the counter argument is that how good are these teams really if they're all kind of beating up, but you can watch any game and see that they're absolutely killing each other on the field when you watch a Big 12 game. But the idea that this, because they're cannibalizing each other, this league isn't equal to a league where maybe Oregon is simply dominating. Or, now Texas is simply dominating. I don't subscribe to that line of thinking. But again, it all comes back to everyone starting from zero but we have an idea of what these teams, we think that they are. And unfortunately, that idea carries water way longer into the season than I think it needs to anymore. I think everybody should start from zero, and then we look at strength of record, strength of schedule, you know, and all these teams know, all these people that are doing analysis know the strength of the players on the team now. It's not like we don't have rosters that we can look up on our computer, you know, or see the stats that they're putting up and things like that. I think you just have to go to a place where you and granted, I'm not a super big fan of ESPN then controlling the narrative middle of the season at zero, but it kind of is that way anyway.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, well, Alabama has, you know, this one loss, but they're really like the best team, guys.
Yeah.
Don't we think so?
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like,
yeah. Well, I mean, that's what it comes down to anyway. They don't want to admit that.
yeah,
You know,
it's always been that way.
Or it's Greg Sankey, you know, basically
Flexing his muscles.
told the world like, hey, we're not out of this thing.
Yeah.
You're like, well, Texas is in it, and then you get them next year. Doesn't count this year.
Yeah.
Believe me, the Big 12's not going to let us have it if they win it. You know, right? That kind of a thing. So, you know, that's how it works. Okay, so the SEC and Big Ten are going to have this scheduling partnership, a challenge, kind of how they do in basketball. Probably spread out over a couple weeks in the early part of the season where, you know, they'll rotate year to year who plays to get those better matchups. You know, with the SEC going to 9 conference games eventually, which is inevitable. They're going to have to do that. And then they're going to have 10 games every year that will be doozies.
Yeah.
You know, and then that's also for a lot of them that have a rival like Georgia and Georgia Tech, Florida and Florida State out of the conference, Clemson and South Carolina, they're going to have 11 really good games on the schedule. And that's what they should do. That's absolutely what they should do. Wow, did your water just squirt out over the?
It might have.
Didn't see that? Okay, you know.
But it's a weird one. I think it's
that's
possessed.
what they should do on the schedule. I think everybody's schedule should be tough. I do, and if we're going to be subject to everything changing all the time because they're going to tell us there's going to be better games, then we should get more. Like, we shouldn't get Alabama versus Wofford in week 11.
Well, yeah, the SEC always did that thing where, and nobody really talked about it. Everybody's like, quote unquote, B-U-Y games came at the beginning of the season. At least that's what the Big 12 teams did. And then they would, you know, they'd play 3 at the beginning and then have 9 conference games where they kill each other down the stretch. The SEC did this thing that I was always jealous of, and I never understood why more conferences didn't do this, where they would have their bye game literally like week 10.
Right before their rivalry game.
Yeah. And so they get to rest players. They get to do this. Oh, you know, Alabama beat Alabama State 100-0 or whatever, and you're just like, how do you get to do that? Like, what? How did they in the middle of the season? All right, you just get it. Okay, sure. When everybody's hurt and whatever. I think the idea that you can have these mega conferences and slowly starting to move to a more you know, single kind of like the NFL model. The idea that you can have these mega conferences and continue to have quote unquote bye games or three non-conference games that don't mean anything, I think is going to go by the wayside.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I'll just use Baylor as an example. When Baylor was rocking and rolling 10 years ago, and then, they would play Wofford and Buffalo and all these teams, UConn, to start thinking that's just not going to happen anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't think it should. If you're going to have all this TV money and all and granted, it's going to suck for the players when we're sending Boston College to California or whatever, you know, just name a plane flight, but we're sending East Coast teams to West Coast and vice versa. It's going to suck for them a little bit, and they're going to get beat up, and these games are going to be brutal for, I think, if you're playing these harder conference games or non-con games. It's going to be brutal. I'll give you that. But the idea that you could have these mega conferences like we're moving towards, and then have these conferences say, no, we're still going to play UTSA.
Yeah.
And you're just like, well, that's not what we're in it for anymore, man.
Yeah.
If we've all made the decision, we've all shook hands and agreed that this is going to be about money.
Well, they have a fiduciary responsibility to the customers, right?
Yeah. At a certain point, all right, what are you giving back to us?
Yeah.
Like, if we've all made that handshake agreement, and whether it's good or bad, we've all decided whatever. All right, give me the games that I want to see.
How else are you going to get me to go along? Even though not me personally, but get the fans.
I was always there, but like
get the fans to go along with.
Yeah.
Eventually, we might push some of your teams out. Like we're going to keep pushing out until this is what it is. The only way that you're going to get people to buy into that is to give them
the big games,
what it could be in the future. Now, now some of those, Rutgers versus South Carolina, they're going to have to put on Thursday night by itself, because otherwise it would get no TV number no matter what. And that, I'm not indicting the current states of those teams, but I'm just saying that,
name brand
people are going to watch A&M versus Oregon way more than they were Rutgers, South Carolina. They're going to watch Bama, Ohio State more than anything they've ever watched in their life.
Yeah, Wake Forest versus,
I'm talking like Big Ten, like
Big Ten, ACC.
Like Northwestern versus Vanderbilt is going to be buried, buried in all that. But still, it's good for the
Mississippi
the
State, Minnesota, which would be fun. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So the Big 12 and ACC, I think, should do this. The problem is that the ACC is in chaos right now.
Right.
So when the ACC gets out of chaos, if they do, then they should just go ahead and say, oh, look, if they're going to do this and they don't want us involved, then we're going to do it on our own, and we're going to have, North Carolina play Texas Tech, and we're going to have Arizona State play Miami, and all these things, because you have to improve the games on your schedule, and if those teams aren't willing to do it with you, then you have to go where that is.
Yeah, you have to go. I mean, they call it the Power Four. We'll see if the ACC even sticks around. I hope that they do, but you have to then start sacrificing some of those games where you would play, not to poo-poo these teams, where like Texas Tech would play UTEP or whatever, and you got to start sacrificing that. Like, nah, man, now you're going to play NC State.
Yeah.
Sorry. Like, it is what it is. Like TCU, you got to go play Miami. Like, you have to start branding those things. And the ACC still has those name brand teams that you would be able to sell and pump up the lesser teams in your conference that may not, like I said, the branding problem of the Big 12, prop up some of those teams that otherwise may not get, like, what is it? The Arizona teams have played midweek games like most of the season now, it feels like. Like, you're going to have to start really leaning into the idea of, our rising tide, unfortunately, isn't going to lift the boats of the people that are outside of this bay.
Yeah.
We're in the safe harbor. Now we have to go and, match up with the other team that's also with the other conference that's also here. If those, those teams aren't willing to branch out and come and play you. So, it'll be interesting to see as far as, like, will we never get a Big 12 SEC game after this? Will we never get a?
I want to say never, but if you're doing
it becomes
this,
less and less hard. It becomes less and less likely.
Yeah. What's their purpose for doing that? Right.
Yeah.
Why would they do that?
And then, people may scoff at the idea, but I think that with basketball we've seen that I think those Big 12 SEC challenge things or the Big 12 ACC challenge things really can kind of facilitate low-key rivalries that we weren't expecting would happen.
No, I agree.
It can bring back something like, and then you could facilitate, if the games are good, man, I can't believe that North Carolina beat the crap out of Baylor in this. I want to play them again.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need to get our get back on North Carolina, which is something you never thought that you would say.
No.
Back in the day. So
no,
I don't know.
And here's the thing, bowl games are about to change too.
Yeah.
Like there's probably not going to be as many. They're going to be devalued. So you want to put weight in the regular season, then do that.
Yeah.
One G5 team, maybe two G5 teams, a power conference team, 9 conference games minimum, like that in 9 conference games.
Yeah.
Do that. So that should be your season. And I know for the FCS and like the guarantee games, that might suck a little bit,
and they need that money.
That money, but there's got to be a different way. There's got to be a different way because they're not beneficial to anybody.
No. And, and gone are the days of we will get another App State versus Michigan. Mm-hmm. How often did that happen?
Well, it's happening more now.
But how often
App State
truly happen?
Yeah. But yeah, the FCS, let's see, North Dakota State beat Kansas State, right? Like that happened.
Yeah.
But other than that, App State was an FCS team when they beat Michigan.
Yeah.
But now they're not. So
yeah. I don't think, look, people may get mad. I don't think that you shouldn't give teams the opportunity to compete. That's not what I'm saying. And you never know what can happen. But it really doesn't that often if we're being pragmatic about it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times it comes down to a team needed the money. They come in, get trounced, and have to, go with their tail between their legs back up to wherever they came from. That's normally what happens. Now, you could get a Liberty and a Baylor situation. But, I just think that having this mega ultra conference, like we keep going back to on this show, we keep going back to the soccer model too, like the Champions League.
It's still pretty fun.
Yeah, everybody
Jack,
that has
you
the
like
most
the Champions League, right? See,
it has the most viewers of anything ever. So besides maybe the Super Bowl, and so they want to see the Spanish teams versus the English Premier League teams. Mm-hmm. They want to see Dortmund get in there. And these big money clubs that have billions of dollars, people still tune in to see that, even though it's these, ultra capitalist mega corporation companies fighting to see who can get the most.
Better as a sometimes thing.
Yeah.
It's a sometimes thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, it's better as a sometimes thing than an all the time thing because when they try to make it an all the time thing, people are like,
people scoffed at that idea of that mega league.
That'll be great when we play Real Madrid one time, but I really hate Liverpool, and I want to see it. Well, Liverpool's probably not a good example, but I really hate Liverpool. I want us to see it play Liverpool 2 or 3 times. I'd rather see that. I'd rather see a derby game than oh look, AC Milan, great.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fun, but.
They tried to do that. They tried to make a Champions, not a European thing, but they tried to make a Super League. Thank you. Yeah, with the top Spanish teams, the top Premier League teams, and really it became the teams that had the most money because I think Chelsea was included and they haven't won in forever, so it doesn't. It was just the teams with the most money. But the idea that you could do that. And people all of a sudden are going to be like, yeah, I really want to watch the big SEC is what they would. I'm sure is what they would call it.
Yeah,
that's what I want to watch all the time. I don't think college football fans are that invested in that. The regionality thing is what we've talked about a lot, and it still exists.
Iowa State and Kansas State fans want Farmageddon. They're mad it's going to be in Ireland next year. They want it there. Now look, they're going to have a fun trip and go to Ireland and have a good time. Although Ireland's a terrible place and awful things happen there.
Hey, I was at the stadium when they announced it, and they had an Irish guy, and credit to him if he was putting on a fake accent, but I don't think he was. I think he was actually Irish, and they flew him in to announce the game against Baylor that they
Farmageddon
were
coming to Ireland.
Yeah, exactly. It was exactly that, and the stadium was like, yay.
Yeah.
There was a half-hearted cheer in the stadium of being like,
you
cool.
know what would get Iowa State fans to Farmageddon there? If he was just like, listen, you people here in Ames think you're good drinkers. Piss on you.
Yeah.
We'll take you out behind the barn and pour Guinness down your throat and still stand up in the morning.
Yeah.
You got nothing on us. You got nothing on us, Cyclones. And then, like, it would just be just a wave.
You said what?
What do you mean? Like, okay. Like,
God, the amount of the amount of Kansas and Iowa drinkers that are going to be in. Oof.
Listen, you purple kitties.
Yeah.
We're not afraid of you drinking. We'll show you what a real man is in Ireland.
That being said, there is Busch Light being imported.
Yeah. You guys drink Busch Light. We drink Guinness.
Yeah.
It's made from mud in the ground.
It's made from a tree that was angry.
Yeah. Guinness comes with pain and suffering. The potato famine and all that.
Yeah.
Busch Light comes from the runoff of Bud Light. No, Busch Light, one of our great sponsors, by the way. So
shout out to Busch Light. You you threw that in your top Garrett, your top keys to the game that they were going to be drinking Busch Light.
Yeah,
and you were not kidding.
Thank you. They love it.
All of the trash cans, they were pulling out the sacks, and it was just there. I don't think I saw a water bottle.
Here's the thing: if there was ever a natural disaster in Ames that canceled a game, like a hurricane, Busch Light would take a hit. Like it would in the quarterly earnings, they'd have been like, "What happened?" End of the third quarter, like, "Oh, there was a tornado in Ames. They had to cancel the game, and move it to another place." And you know, when they went to the other place, we don't have a good market share there, so
we're in the red now, dude.
Like, well, all right, I guess one of our upper level executives is going to have to get fired.
Yeah,
Glenn, I'm sorry, but you know, the wheel of doom fell on you. So, yeah.
It is unbelievable the amount of Busch Light that is being drunk there.
Yeah.
Great product, by the way.
And here's the thing. They're just, because it's lighter, they're going to have to do a lot more work to catch up to Guinness drinkers. But, man, in Ireland, they really pound that Guinness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You a Guinness guy?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's okay.
It grew on me over the years. Yeah. It grew on me over the years. Now, I don't know how well I would do with room temperature things over there.
Right.
Because that's what they do, you know. So it would take me probably a couple days to get used to it. Like, I'd love an ice cold beer, and they're like, "Yeah, we'd love the monarchy to be done, but I mean, you know, not everything. We don't get everything we want
too.
Yeah. So.
Oh, by the way, Iowa State fans, Kansas State fans, if you're going to Ireland, don't tell them that you're Irish.
Oh,
they don't care.
They don't care. No,
they are Irish too.
Yeah. They stayed.
Yeah. They're like, yeah. So is my mom. Like, you know, like.
Oh, your ancestors ran out during the potato famine, did they? Oh, you think you're tough? You think you're tough? We stayed. We stayed until the potatoes came back.
We grew it on this land.
So,
awesome.
By the way, my Irish accent is maybe my best one.
Pretty good.
Yeah, it's maybe my best one. So,
I'm sure all your Irish listeners will be like, scoff at it, but.
Oh, I'm sure,
yeah.
But it's not. Look, it's not bad. It's called growing up with Irish priests. I mean, that's where you get it. Like, I had so many Irish priests in my life that
couldn't help.
You just occasionally like, Paul, would you mind going up to the tabernacle? I left the key there, would you?
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, sure thing. All right, I gotta wash this chalice. Just be a good lad and go up there. Yeah, okay.
Been working on it for years.
Yeah. Oh, good job ringing the bells there, son. Good job. Really, really magical. Really added to the Eucharistic ceremony. So, yeah, no, I've heard it all. I've heard it all.
Maybe with you and also your spirit.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You've been there. I see it. Yeah, you've been there. Today on The Big Show, we've got Rob Mosley's going to be talking about Oregon and their huge win. Matt Brown from Extra Points went to Provo and found a pod of beer drinkers there. So very, very curious to hear how that went and
Shout
what
out,
that's
guys.
like.
Fighting the brave fight.
Yeah, like basically he did a story on non-LDS BYU fans. You know.
They do exist.
Yeah. Now, does BYU need them to up their numbers? No, but it's just nice to have.
Yeah.
Because they have so many fans.
Oh, quick story. I know we're late, but we went to that BYU game a couple of weeks ago, and my dad hates being next to fans from other teams. He just thinks that it's just annoying and yada yada. And Baylor's getting reamed, and so he's just and the BYU fans we sat next to, they traveled all the way in from BYU, flew into Dallas, came down, and they're scoring, and my dad's steaming, and the BYU fan just goes, "I'm so sorry that we're cheering next to you. I really am, like, apologize for being obnoxious." And my dad had no choice but to be like, "No, it's cool." And we got out of there. It's like, they were the nicest people I've ever met in my entire life. And I'm like, I told you. Yeah. Like, it's just like, they're like, yeah, hey, yeah. So sorry. I apologize.
Was that over the top?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
I just get excited. Yeah. Scott Mitchell will talk Utah with us, former NFL quarterback, left-handed passer extraordinaire.
Love it.
John McClain of the NFL Hall of Fame columnist.
Right.
But and then we'll also have our Big 12 Bowlsby pod, which is BYU, Cincy, Houston, and UCF. Craig's most off the radar. My top 5. He's Royden. I'm Paul. Have a great day, everybody.